First of all, good morning. I would like to start by saying that I have had many failures in many projects during my career. And everything you're going to hear now are based on these failures, because I believe that we learn the most from failures. I've also had some successes, so don't worry, okay? This is not about how to fail. This is about how to succeed. I guess that as an architect, the word coaching doesn't automatically come to mind. But I find that true leadership comes from helping others to succeed. And that is your true success. That would be the basis for today. And on the last day of this conference, I'm actually going to do a full-day workshop on these exact ideas. These are some questions that I've been facing throughout my career, and perhaps some of you have as well. Maybe you've been trying to convince other people in your team to practice specific practices. Maybe you were wondering what it is that's actually expected of you. Maybe you already know exactly how to do things. Well, that's why they hired you. But nobody else doesn't seem to actually grasp what it is you're trying to teach. Or when they do and they say, yes, that's great, still nothing happens. And those are things that I think a lot of us face every day, but no one ever teaches us how to handle those situations. So the big question is, are you a leader? And I believe that everyone in this room has the potential to be a leader. And I think that the reason you have that potential is because you're all bottlenecks. And let me explain that. A bottleneck is someone that other people come to for help with specific issues. A bottleneck is the only person who can help with that issue, so everyone comes to them. They are the decision makers in specific issues. So you are, in a way, the leader of the architecture in your team or your organization. And that means that you're also the bottleneck, the single point of decision making. And that means that everyone has to wait for you to do something. If you are away for a few days, how easy is it really to turn off your phone? When you come back, how worried are you from a few days vacation? And I believe that by being a bottleneck, you are also getting the opportunity to become a leader by teaching others and by removing yourself as a bottleneck. So I believe that your role as a leader, not just as an architect, is to actually remove yourself from being needed in your team. That might sound contradictory, right? There's a reason they hired you. But I believe that your role is to actually make yourself unneeded. Think about it. If I'm an architect and I go into a team, I believe that my job is to make everyone around me an architect, to teach everyone how I think about specific issues, so that the next time that they fall on an issue, instead of asking me, what do I think, they will ask themselves, well, how should I think about this problem? And hopefully they will have more tools of facing the problem on their own. And this whole thing is about having teams that are self-organizing. You've all probably heard all the buzz about agile development and lean, and a lot of that buzz is about self-organizing teams. And almost whenever I hear the word self-organizing, the phrase self-organizing teams, almost everyone I talk to always says, yeah, not going to work for us. Or I hear a lot of people say, yes, we're self-organizing, but the team isn't truly self-organizing. When people mean self-organizing teams, what they should be talking about is a team that can solve their own problems, including architecture problems. But if the team needs you to solve their problems, they're not truly self-organizing if they have to wait for you. So a team can be self-organizing when they can have the same thinking and the same knowledge that you have, so that they don't need you to solve their problems. So in essence, each team should have an architect, or each team can think as an architect without needing an architect. So by the very definition of your role is to be a bottleneck. So I believe that as architects, we should be measuring ourselves by how much we grow the team to have architectural skills. And every week I would ask myself, does the team have more skills this week than they had the previous week? And if the answer is no, then I would ask, what am I going to do about that? Because that's my measure of how successful I am. If my measure of how successful I am is how many nights do I stay late to solve and fix fires, then I'm doing the wrong thing. Because I'm just teaching everyone to rely on me even more. And that's kind of nice in terms of job security, but it's only going to last for a specific amount of time until either you burn out or they find someone else to replace you. Nobody likes someone who hogs knowledge. And the minute that something else, just even a little bit better, comes up, they will find a way to replace that problem. So instead, if we start saying, okay, so my job is to distribute knowledge, we make ourselves actually more valuable to the organization. Whenever I say, make yourself unneeded, people say, oh, but then they won't need me. Well, yes, but think of it like this. You teach other people, you grow them, and suddenly you don't just become an architect. You have become the person who grows other people. And in the organization, that's actually more valuable. That's like World of Warcraft, gaining XP points. You've upped one level, and now you're the person that you can put in a team so that they can learn architectural skills, not just so that they can solve architecture skills. But of course, you might be saying to yourself, yes, that's great. I think that's great. We should all be teaching our teams. But in my team, it's not going to work. I mean, sure, if I had a better team, then all the things you say, perfect, I'm right on it. But in my current team, I'm not sure. You see, I had that guy, and I have that girl, and then, that guy doesn't really want to learn, and she doesn't really care, and whatever. People have differences in opinion about what is the true abilities of their team. But if your job is to grow the people on your team, you have to understand this. In a perfect world, yes, you can hire a team that fits just exactly what you need. But if you truly want a great team, you have to realize that great teams are grown. You cannot just hire them. You get base material, and that's your job, to take that base material and to shape it into something that you would like to see. So, if I start in a project and I have a team of 5 inexperienced people who have no idea what they're doing, the worst thing that I could do is to roll my eyes to the heavens and say, well, that's not going to work. My job is to actually say, okay, how do I take this team and I transform them into a team that can actually do the job? I believe that's what I get paid for. How do I transform them into a team that knows how to think about architecture? Yes, it's a long process. Yes, it's not easy. But nobody ever said this is going to be easy. Just cruising, you just get the perfect team, and you just say, yes, you should definitely do that. Yes, do that, and then you just go home at 4, right? Everyone has that. No, leadership is a tough job. Jerry Weinberg, in his book, Becoming a Technical Leader, has this great quote. Leadership done right is a very tough job. That's why you get paid more. But a lot of leaders like to take the money and not do all the hard parts. And what are the hard parts? Talking to people, confronting people about things that they need to learn. Asking people and challenging them to learn new things, even if they think it's your job. So when I had a leader who asked me to do something that was definitely out of my comfort zone, I remember I came to that person and I said, hey, can you solve this problem for me? And he explained to me that his job is not to solve my problems, but to teach me how to solve my problems. And I remember the look that I had when he told me that. It was kind of like, what? I came to you because it's your job to solve my problems. I believed at that time that his job was to protect me from the organization, to protect me from any issues, and just, the way that a lot of Agile folks say, clear the way so I can just do my job typing away code. But then I wouldn't be learning anything new. So when he said, look, I need you to do this, I said, yeah, that's going to be a problem. And we had quite an argument. But it took a few months for me to realize just how much I am learning. And that's going to be a process. That's something that you will have to face as well, is that not everyone is going to like the way you might try to do things. And that's one of the reasons that we are afraid to confront people about how they do their jobs. Because we're afraid of losing maybe friendships. We're afraid of losing respect from other people. It's always nice to be liked and to have great friendships, etc. at work. But I'm here to contend that people will not stop being your friends if you ask them to do something that's out of their comfort zone. You might actually be more respected by doing true justice to your job, and if you explain why it is that you're demanding them to do more things and to solve their own problems. So in a way, what I'm saying is that being an architect is not about technical abilities as it is about people abilities. And that's a big shift. Just because you were a great programmer and you can think about design doesn't mean that you can get things done in the real world. And that's what a lot of us are facing. We come with all these abilities and then we face a wall and we have no idea how to cross it. And this is why we have to make that shift and understand that our role is to learn how to influence other people and learn how to work with others and challenge them and grow them. And if we start measuring ourselves that way, the shift is that we don't just think about things in a technical way, but in a people way. And since a lot of you are architects, or most of you, or hopefully all of you, then you've probably heard the phrase that all software problems are people problems. And if you've never heard this, let me tell you, all software problems are people problems. Eventually, it all leads down to someone who doesn't want to do something or wants to do something else for different reasons. It's all about practices. It's about instilling specific behaviors. If you do the best course about good architecture, you send people to a 5-day course just about architecture. Do you truly expect them to change the way that they work from that day and all the code will just be great and much better without you doing any reviews and no coaching from you and no help? Do you expect no resentment that people have to change their ways? Because you are living in a delusional world if you do. People hate change a lot of times. And one of the things that we as architects require is change. Because a lot of the things that we see in reality have to change. It's our job to change them. But to do that, we have to actually change the minds of other people. So, how the hell do you do that? All I said is great, and you know what? It's really nice, like, yeah, we should definitely grow our team. Now we go back to work and say, grow, right? Leadership, grow. No. What you actually have to do is you have to start realizing the world you're living in. The world you're living in is full of growth opportunities, and you've all been through that stuff. To understand how people learn, let's look at a simple example. This is from another book by, this is actually from Becoming a Technical Leader by Jerry Weinberg. I really like this book, and I hope that you all read it, by the way. And in this book, he outlines his progress playing, I'm not sure what is the game. I think it's called Flipper, where you have the ball going, and you have to make sure it doesn't fall between the cracks, whatever. And anyway, he gets more points as time goes by. So he tracked his progress and the amount of points he gets over a few years. And what he saw is definitely steady growth and definitely steady learning in getting better and better at the game. So far, no surprises. When he zoomed in a bit more, what he saw, something a bit different than he expected. He saw these plateaus, very, very slow and steady growth, or becoming better, but very, very slowly. And then he saw spurts of very, very speedy enhancement of abilities. And he had to wonder what happens in those times where I became much, much better in a very, in a quick time. And those points where we have quick enhancements were the times where he learned something new about the game. For example, at some point he discovered that if you have more than a single ball in the game at the same time, you get double points for every hit. So he started aiming for getting more and more balls in the game at the same time. And that made him much better. So every time he learned something new about the game and he applied it, he became miles better than he was. But there was something even more interesting. When he zoomed in even more, he saw that before he got better, he actually got worse. And that kind of makes sense. To start to learn how to play with more than a single ball in the game at the same time, he had to learn how to do it. So at the beginning, he sucked at it, even worse than he used to play regularly. And if you think about it, when you learn a new programming language, at the beginning, you suck at it. Just writing the first hello world in a new language is usually very, very difficult. And I remember I actually started in Visual Basic. When I moved to .NET and C#, I remember having a really hard time just getting things to, compile correctly and all the semicolons and all the curly braces crap. When I moved from .NET to Ruby, I remember having the same problems, deleting all the semicolons and the curly braces. I remember when I was learning C++, I remember just understanding the first compiler errors, seeing hundreds of errors with no line of code. Just understanding the compiler was so difficult. And you realize that your life is made of these things. Whenever you want to truly get better, you have to forget what you already know and learn a completely new technique. But it doesn't just apply to programming. It applies to life in general. You can say that the first dot is my wife and I before we had kids. We were just two adults living in the world, having fun, traveling, speaking at conferences, whatever. And then one day, surprise, we had a child. And instantly, our life became worse. It was very difficult to even make ourselves dinner. People actually had to bring food to our house. We were so tired. Everything was so difficult. We had to learn how to manage with no sleep, how to do, shifts. You sleep with the baby, I sleep with it. You have to go, and someone had to go to work at some point. Life was worse. Of course, it was a baby, and we loved him. But life was very, very difficult. And it took us a few months to actually get better at life. We started getting used to it, At some point, life got better. We found a way to organize ourselves with a new person in the family. And when we looked back from the second point to the first, we couldn't believe we ever said things like, "Ooh, I never have enough time." Because now we had to do the same exact things with a baby. And life was nice for a couple of years. And then another baby came. And instantly our life became worse. We had to learn how to manage two babies. What happens when one baby cries at night? What is the chain reaction that happens in the room? What happens when you cannot do shifts anymore because you have two babies who sleep at very different times? And you still have to go to work in the morning. We had to learn totally different techniques, right? If at the beginning one person could just go out and do shopping and leave the other one with one child, now one person would do shopping with a child. Do you know how scary it is to do shopping with a child? As a father, this was one of the scariest moments in my life. Just afraid he's going to be one of those kids in the commercials who just cries all the time, like a condom commercial, Wasn't that, but I still had to do it. We had to learn all these techniques. And after a few months, we became better. We learned the tricks, the techniques. We got better. And life was better. And we looked back from the third point to the second point, and we said, we cannot believe we ever had trouble with a single child. A single baby, that's like a vacation. If you leave me with just one child, I can do anything. It's like a tampon commercial. I can go tennis, I can do whatever I want. And if I ever look at the first point, I don't even want to talk to you if you don't have kids. And you say you don't have time. Now we're doing the same things with 2 kids, and it's amazing. We are totally different people than we were. And then 2 years later, our 3rd child was born. He's now 2.5 years old. And instantly, our life became worse. We thought we were ready. We thought, 2 kids, 3rd one, he'll just play with them. Everything's going to be easier. No. We had to learn guarding techniques. How do you guard 3 kids? You can't just have 1 kid for each parent anymore. Now you have to at least 1 person with 2 kids all the time. Right? Everything becomes harder. Just finding a way of getting them, with clothes in the morning. We live in Norway, by the way. Clothing 3 kids in the morning in Norway is not the same as in a warmer place. It just takes more amount of clothes. The amount of abstraction layers that you have to put on the child is very, very, someone said too damn high. I think that's true. Anyway, after about 6 months, we learned how to live with 3 kids. And we love them. And it's great. But if I look back from the 4th point to the 3rd point, 2 kids is so easy. 2 kids is truly like a vacation. 1 child, I don't have kids with 1 child. It's like, just whatever, just don't eat that knife, okay? Like easy stuff. We are different people with 3 kids than we were with 2 and with 1. But we had to forget what we knew and learn everything from the beginning. And when we did, and we looked back, we realized how much we learned. And that's the thing. We say that 3 kids is it's doable. But I know people with 6 kids, and I have no idea how many steps they had to go through. What the hell happened there? Okay? Different techniques altogether. So I know there's always more to learn. So these things exist. And once you realize that everything that you learn has a downslope before it has an upslope, whatever that means, whenever you realize that, you can say, okay, I can start planning it. If I truly want to learn something new, then I will plan the downslope instead of having it controlling me. So let's say that when I wanted to learn Ruby, I said, okay, what is a truly downslope? What is something that truly will make me feel annoyed, scared? Because that's the true measure of learning, right? You have to be down there in order to go up. You have to feel uncomfortable. You have to feel a little bit, at least, annoyed. You have to feel out of place, a fish out of water. You have to feel like, I do not want to be here sometimes. You have to feel that way, and you have to have another voice in your head that says, this is good. You feel really, really, really uncomfortable. That means you're learning something. When you start having those 2 voices in your head, then you are finally controlling your learning process. And the reason we have to learn how to do this is because when we can start to plan our own learning, we can start helping other people in our team to plan their learning. When we realize that everything we do has a downslope and we can plan it, we can also help other people plan their downslopes. If we want to grow our team, we have to throw them down these ravines as well. If we want our teams to get better and to be truly self-organizing and learn new skills, we have to realize that we have to throw them over a cliff, one by one, so that they come out on a higher cliff. And that is truly scary, because you realize that your job is to make people uncomfortable. If you truly want to grow them, they have to feel uncomfortable. No, it's not just about learning a new framework. It's not uncomfortable learning a new framework in your favorite language. You should feel a bit scared to do it. It has to have some kind of risk. It has to have something that truly makes you think, should I really truly be doing this? And when my manager came to me and said, I need you to do something, and I thought that it was his job, that was an example of that thing, where I thought, I'm not supposed to be doing this, right? I'm not supposed to talk to the marketing people. I'm just a developer. What the hell do you expect me to do about that? And that's a skill that developers need to learn in that specific organization. So if you want your developers to grow, to become architects, you have to throw them from a cliff and ask them to do things that you usually do. And that might mean that it's not in their job description. But the news is that it is. If you want them to be truly self-organizing, you want to grow them, your job and their job is to get out of the comfort zone and to learn new skills. Now, what happens in real life is that there are always ups and downs, but the truly learning is a really big one. So it's always noticeable, but there are always randomizations. An example of something that I did, how scared do you have to be, is when I left my job, comfortable job as a CTO of a .NET company, and I decided to become a Ruby intern. So I decided to quit my job and become an intern at a Ruby shop. We had 6 Russian developers all sitting in a room just cursing at the computer. They were all working on MacBook Airs with Vim. Vim, I've never even seen a MacBook Air before, and I had to learn Vim. Now there's a joke about Vim. There are many, but there's a joke about Vim. How do you keep a student occupied for 4 hours? You open Vim and you ask them to close it. And that happened to me, so it's not funny. So I had to get the hell out of my comfort zone, and this was on purpose. I had to sit there and feel like an idiot. For 6 months, I felt like an idiot, just learning all the shortcuts and not even being able to write a single line. I already knew Ruby, and I still couldn't type it. That's how difficult Vim is. Okay, so if you ever feel uncomfortable, just put Vim in front of you and realize that your life is very, very easy. So after 6 months, I started feeling comfortable with that. I learned things that I never even knew that I didn't know. I didn't know about some practices that come from the Ruby world that are so different from the .NET world. I could never have learned them if I had just sat very comfortably in the evenings after my work and done just a little Ruby on the side. Because these are cultural things. There are things, for example, very, very small commits. Thinking in a way about tooling that is very, very down-to-earth and very, very lean, very small tooling. Pair programming via SSH and Vim over a network connection in a way that I've never done before. And those things taught me so much because they made me a better developer. Even today in .NET, if I can do .NET, Ruby, and Java, and all that stuff. But even today, when I do that, there are things that I've learned, shortcuts and ideas, that help me in any environment that I learn. And I can choose the tools that I need for a specific job. I'm not bound to specific technology. I'm not bound to a specific way of thinking. I can look at something from a distance, and I can say, this is how they solve it, this is how they solve it, this is how they solve it. Which one should I choose? Should I choose a combination that makes me a better architect? There are so many ways to solve something, especially in technology. It would be a sin not to take yourself a bit out and start learning and zooming out and looking outside your comfort zone and looking at these things. And when you do that, that is your learning, and you have to teach the same type of learning to your team. So to grow the team, we must first grow ourselves. We have to feel that fear. We have to feel that discomfort. We have to do it in an explicit way. We have to force ourselves to do it. Because only after we've done it ourselves, in a way that we're aware of, then we can truly ask other people to do it. If I want to grow someone in my team, and I say, I need you to do something that's uncomfortable for you, but I've never done it on my own, how could I possibly ask them with a straight face? I couldn't actually explain to them why is it so beneficial until I've actually felt the effects of it. And I realized at some point that by asking our team to take risks, this is our risk. So if you just try one thing, it is to challenge people. Challenge people is a very challenging thing for the challenger, okay? Confronting people, talking to them about things that actually matter, that could save their job or could help the team work better with them, are things that are very hard to do. The scariest thing I've ever done as a team leader was to actually confront a person about really bad habits that they were doing. As an architect, I also had the same problem. We had a person who was a very, very slow typist, and I had to go and And I had to do something. I was complaining to my manager about the fact that this person types so slowly and always uses the mouse, and everyone on the team was like a shortcut junkie. And nobody wanted to work with the person. It was very, very problematic. But this person was such a nice person. He was everybody's friend. He knew what he was doing. He was not a bad programmer. He just had different ideas on what it means to be productive. Okay? That created a rift in the team. Nobody ever told him anything about it. Nobody ever would dare to do something about it, but it definitely affected the team. And I remember talking to my manager about it, and he told me, you have to talk to him about it. That will be your learning. I said, really? Seriously? I'll talk to him. He's my friend. He'll never want to be my friend anymore if I talk to him about it. And he said, you have to talk to him about it, and you have to explain it to him like you explained it to me, but of course in a respectful way. And I decided that I'm going to do it. I don't even know why I decided I'm going to do it. I think that the thing that changed my mind was that this is my thing to learn. This is my ravine to jump into. And I remember that I decided to go to the room. It was basically as far away as the wall over there. And I remember my hands shaking as I was going to the team room to talk to the person. And I opened the door and I said, hey, you got 5 minutes to talk? He said, sure, you know. And in my mind, it was like, lamb to the slaughter, you know. And I was going to talk to him, and we sat in the room, and he was sitting right next to me, all smiling. And then a thought came to me. Maybe something's wrong at home. Maybe that's why he's working so slowly. I'll ask him whether everything is okay. And I asked him, so how are things at home? And he said, great. And I thought, shit. And then I asked him, well, what do you think about the way you work? He said, I think it's great. He didn't even know that there was a problem. And usually most people don't realize there was a problem. And then I asked him something. I asked, what if I told you that you could be typing 5 times faster? What do you think about that? And surprisingly, he said, sounds cool. I'll try that. And and all the adrenaline that I had was like, oh, seriously? That's all? And I realized that this was the wall that I had to go through. And then we decided that I will give him a software that teaches blind typing, and every week I would be like his coach. Every week we would meet, and he would show me how better he was typing the specific amount, an article that we knew. And it took a few months, but he was a much better typist after that. He was not the world's most fastest developer. He didn't know all the resharper shortcuts everywhere, but he was much better and easier to work with. And that made a difference to me, because I realized that a lot of the fear that we have in ourselves to do these things is because we replay conversations in our head, and we already imagine what the person will say. And that's a defense mechanism. We tell ourselves, oh, I already know how that's going to go, so I'm not going to do that. But that's not true. It's your job to talk to people and confront them about things that truly matter. When I say confront, it doesn't mean you have to be aggressive or even assertive. You just have to talk to them about true issues. And if you just dance around the things, nothing will ever, ever change. And of course, all that's great. All that wishy-washy stuff, that's great. But who has time for that, seriously? Nobody here has time for that. That would be my guess. Nobody here has time because you're already maybe late on a feature. Maybe you already are putting out too many fires that should have been put out 6 months ago. Maybe. Could be just me, though. I know that when I tried to make the time, we didn't have the time to decide that I'm gonna do coaching and grow other people. Just did it every once in a while. And I did this talk in a different way in other places, actually in QCon in England a few years ago. And I explained that as a team leader, you also have to group the team and have to protect the team and all that stuff. And then someone said, no, but you actually have to grow the team and let them self-organize. And I realized, well, sometimes that's true, and sometimes that's true. Sometimes you need this type, and sometimes you need that type of leadership. So to actually make time, we have to understand that a team can be, the way I think about it, in one of 3 modes. Survival mode, which is the mode that I think most teams are right now, that's the mode where you don't have any time to learn. You cannot spend time on slow practice. That's the mode where you don't have any slack time. Yes, you sent a couple of people to TDD course, you send a person to a Scrum Master course, but who has time to truly implement that? Nobody, right? You add maybe 5 or 10% to the project time, that's not gonna work. Not gonna work because to truly learn something, you have to slowly practice it 300% more, 400% more time in the first few months. And if you're in survival mode, it means you cannot afford that time. And so all your efforts to learn new things will actually fail if you're in survival mode. And once you understand that meta-thinking, you can start to plan how to get out of survival mode and into learning mode, where you actually have time to practice. And in learning mode, you can do all these nice things that we just talked about. But if you're in survival mode, then your job is to get the hell out of survival mode. And that's one of the most difficult things. Because in survival mode, usually you don't have time to learn, so you don't have time to make things better, which means you have even less time to learn later. So it's like a vicious circle. In learning mode, you do make things better, and then things become better. It's a good circle. Self-organizing mode is when the team doesn't need you. They can make their own decisions. In learning mode, you teach them how to make their own decisions and how to solve their own problems. But if you don't have the time to do all that, you're already lost. This is usually what happens. You probably have heard of this. This is the circle of death. Not the circle, sorry. The triangle of death. You can have features or time or quality, but you can only choose two. So people usually just choose features and time, but they let go of quality. Oh, we don't have time. Throw the unit tests out the boat. Sure. Or just, continue not to do unit testing. Maybe that's better. How does that happen? Well, this happens because in survival mode, there is what I call survival addiction. An addiction cycle is when you're convinced that the thing you have to do is the only possible best solution. So you continue doing it. For example, you might have a dilemma. Well, we have this feature, should we write tests for it? Or we have a bug, should we write tests before we fix the bug? Or should we just get it done? Of course, the answer is we don't have time for that. Let's just fix it, fix the fire, get stuff done, ship it. And then you feel actually pretty good because you did something, right, under fire. You feel like a hero. I did that so many times. And then the feeling is great because you got something done under fire. So you were able to ship something. And then the next week, you have the same dilemma. Do we write tests or do we just get it done? Well, what did we do last time? Oh, we didn't do any tests? How did that feel? Felt good? Okay, then. Let's continue to do that. But that's an example of what happens. You continue to do that, you get that. We have to do a rewrite. Nobody here has ever done a full rewrite and not felt amazing about it. But very few people actually get to do that. So you cannot trust that, oh, we'll just continue to do that, and in 6 months we'll just rewrite the whole thing. That's not a good application lifecycle management. So we have to get out of survival mode because we want to have time to learn so that we can grow our team so they can be self-organizing and fix their own problems. That's the basic chain of responsibility here. That's the reason. So we have to find time to learn. We have to get out of survival mode. To break survival addiction, to get the hell out of survival mode, you have to start taking risks. You have to get out of your comfort zone and start removing commitments. Because the only reason survival mode exists is because the team is overcommitted to things. Because the team says yes when they should be saying, I'm not sure I can do that. Well, here's a way to say no by saying yes. You have a task board with the sticky notes, or you have it on a screen with sticky notes, or virtual sticky notes, and then you get a new task. And you don't say no. You just say to the product owner, okay, where should the sticky note go? Just tell me. Above that sticky note or below? Which one is more important? That's all you have to do. You shift the decision of how important something is. But at the same time, you do not change your commitments or the amount of time that you have committed to. You will realize that the product owner will realize automatically that they have to make a trade-off. But most developers and most architects and most team leaders, they like to tell people what they want to hear. And that happened to me, of course. In one of the first projects ever, we had 3 months to finish an 8-month project. Never happened to anyone here, I'm sure. You ever been on a project where on the first day you knew the project was going to fail? That was that project. So how did we even only get 3 months to finish an 8-month project? Here's a funny story. I went to my manager and he said, look, Roy, I trust you. We have 3 months to finish this. I know you can do it. Can you do it? And I already knew it's not going to be 3 months. He said, Roy, I trust you. Can you do it for the company? What did I say? I think I could, actually. We could try. You know what? We'll try. We'll give it our best try, and I think we just might be able to do that, sir. And that was a horrible mistake. Not facing reality. I was actually lying to my manager, told him exactly what he wanted to hear, instead of actually being truthful. People will respect you more when you're being truthful. They might not like what you have to say, but since reality is what reality is, it's not going to change just because you lied about it. It's still going to take 8 months. The only difference is, did you say it was going to take 8 months, or did you lie and say it's going to take 3 months? And then who's going to feel bad? You take the blame on yourself, remove the blame from anyone else. But here's a simpler version of that. I had a team that I was coaching, and they said, the worst thing that happens is that the marketing people are overselling the features of the product. They always oversell, and they promise things that we can absolutely not do. And then we have to scramble and work until midnight every day just to get things done. That happens every iteration, every release. How do we stop it? So I asked them a simple question. Well, when they oversell, do they actually deliver? And they said, well, yes. Well, I said, well, why would the marketing people change their behavior if you're giving them exactly what they expected? For them, this is working perfectly, right? They'll just say, yeah, we can do that. And then magically, that actually happens. Can you imagine how glad they are when that happens? They're getting their commissions, whatever they need, and all they have to do is oversell. And it seems to just work. There are no consequences for the behavior. And what happens is that the team gets burned, and this is not a sustainable way to keep development. So you might have bursts of these things, but you cannot have that on a sustainable level. So survival mode is when we agree to overcommit. Survival mode is totally up to us. It's only as good as our estimate. If my estimate includes unit testing built in, then I will never be in survival mode. Think about that. If my estimate builds quality in, and I don't ask permission for unit tests, just like I don't ask permission for debugging, because I don't, then I build the quality in. So things take what they take. I'm the one who gave the estimate. No one ever said, you have 3 months and I don't care what you have to say. Some people say, we have to deliver in 3 months, can you do it? They still ask me. I can still say, in 3 months we can deliver less. I can still say, in 3 months, the same amount of features, we need 300 more people. I can say those things, but it's my estimate that counts. It's your estimate that counts. If your estimate at the beginning already overcommits to what you wish you could do, then you've already buried yourself in your own little grave. And I know that sounds grim, but it's absolutely true. You will never get out of survival mode if you don't change your estimates. And that's, for a lot of people, that's very scary, because everyone is used to getting very, very short estimates from you. But you're used to giving very short estimates because that's what they expect. But if you want to build quality in, you can never get that, because when you ask for quality, that's not a feature. It doesn't bring value to the company, at least not in the short term. You cannot expect that. You have to build the quality in, just like when I go and I fix my car in the garage. The guy doesn't ask me, how well do I want it to get fixed? He just fixes it, and he tells me it's going to take a long time and a lot of money, right? Professional. I don't trust that professional, but I don't have a choice because he's the professional, and I have no idea what I'm doing if I'm going to fix my car. If I go and buy a car, the salesman doesn't ask me, hey, do you want it with wheels or without wheels? It's part of the car. Unit testing is just like debugging. It's part of the way you work. If you want to build unit testing in, change your estimates to include it. When people ask, why does it take so long? You say, because this is how we work. This is how long it takes. And that takes guts. Because you might have another team in the same company that says, we'll do it for half the time, sir. That's not a sustainable way. You have to live up to your own code of conduct. And you will find that there are many companies out there who will gladly take you because that is exactly your code of conduct. You don't have to explain why you're doing unit testing. Just like you don't have to explain why you're doing debugging. The boss comes in, catches you in the middle of a debug line. Why is that line yellow? Can you imagine that? But the same thing happens if they catch you writing unit tests. How can you let that happen? You have decoupled the unit test from writing the code, and that's not the right way to go about it. It is a risk, only until you realize that once you've done it, it's not that big of a risk. The project is still going to lose time. The only difference is it going to lose time in the beginning for the quality, or is it going to lose time in the end because of lack of quality? Time is still going to be lost. And usually unit testing actually makes up for the time at the end. It just takes a while to see it. And that's why you have to stand up for what you need. Okay, so all that was fine, and then you make time, and then you can grow the team, etc. But to understand how to actually convince people, how do you actually get your team to do unit testing? Okay, you changed your estimate. Why doesn't everyone else change their estimate? Well, you have to understand that every behavior that you see actually comes from a specific amount of forces that act on that person. So I'll refer you to a great book called Influencer, The Power to Change Anything. And in that book, one of the key takeaways is that for each behavior, the world is perfectly designed for that behavior to happen. If you see a person who's always late to a Scrum meeting, I can tell you that if you were that person, if you had their parents, if you grew up in their school, if you had their education, if you ate the same food, if you had their body mass, if you had their car, if you had everything, if you were them, you would have done the exact same thing. Everything around that person is designed for that behavior to happen. You just have to figure out what is it. You have to start playing Sherlock Holmes. You have to start understanding behavior forces. And there are 6 forces that we can look at to understand why something is done or not done. And usually, as developers, as architects, we just look at the first 2, right? Usually, when you try to convince someone, I made it black so you can look at me. When you try to convince someone, you try to convince them, and then they either get convinced or they don't. And then you say, that person obviously doesn't care, right? I explained, and I explained, and I explained. Nothing changed. I'm stumped. Well, that's the first 2 things. You sent the person to a course. You gave them personal ability. And then you explain to them how important unit testing is. You try to give them personal motivation. And then you think that should be enough, because we're logical people. But logic, it doesn't always play to the behaviors we need to happen. So we have to start looking at social and environmental motivations and abilities. And you'll find that even though people really want to do things, and they know how to do them, they might still actually not do them. Because, for example, socially, people might be motivated by peer pressure to do the wrong thing. Maybe people that they respect might be doing the wrong thing. If you've ever been in an argument with your wife or significant other, and you were both convinced that you're right and she's wrong, and she was convinced that you're wrong and she's right, and then, a third party, a friend came over, and you said, hey, she thinks that, and then she said, no, he thinks that, and then the third party said, well, actually, I think that's actually true. And then your wife would be like, oh, you know what, actually, that convinced me. And you're like, what? We were fighting on that for a week. But you see, when there's someone that you actually respect that says the thing. Oh, that didn't come out right. But sometimes you need to hear it from a source that you look up to. and try to understand that if someone is looking up to the person that gives them a different kind of behavior, you have to find a different source of influence. If you have a manager that never gives budget for an automated build server, see who they look up to, what magazines do they read. Find people that they respect, that believe in the right process. You'll find that influence is very powerful when it's someone that they respect. Sometimes it's just social ability. If you're the only person doing unit testing and the whole team is like, I don't know why that guy is doing unit testing, you're going to stop doing unit testing pretty quickly. Social peer pressure is an amazing, powerful force. If a person is always late to a Scrum meeting and the whole team never does anything about it, everyone's just like, well, let's continue then. When they were all waiting 15 minutes just getting annoyed, and this happens all the time, why would that person change their behavior if no one ever tells him anything about it? If no one ever tells him, you know what? We're all annoyed that you keep showing up very late. Maybe then that person will realize that there is actually a problem. But if that person has no consequence, gets no consequences for their behavior, why would they change it? And even if socially everyone wants you to do the right thing and the people you look up to do the right thing, you still might not do it because environmentally you could be challenged. Environmental ability. Imagine that we want to do pair programming, but all the tables are shaped in a way that there's only room for one person to sit. You know those tables? There's a room for your belly, and that's it. So you want to pair program, just you and your belly, or me and my belly, and you program, and everyone who wants to pair program, they have to like sit next to me and go like this behind my back. That's not pair programming. You want to stop pair programming, you get those tables, you'll see how fast that stops. Or you'll see how fast that never happens, pair programming, when you have these tables. Everyone might want to do it, but it just doesn't feel good physically. But you could still have environmental ability that stops you. You want to get unit testing done, but you don't have a budget for a build server. Well, that stops you, right? Everyone wants to do it, but we don't have a server. So that's kind of a problem. What if you solve it? What if you have a server? What if you have the right tables and the right chairs and everyone is in the same room? Still, people might not do it because you might have the wrong motivation by the environment. Rewards and punishments for doing specific behaviors. If you want people to live healthy lives and leave early from work, but you have the boss, 6:30, the boss is looking in the parking lot and counting how many cars are still in the parking lot. That's an example of rewards or punishments for specific behavior. If the boss stays up late and everyone is afraid to leave until the boss leaves, that's an example of negative behavior that gets influenced. What if, well, Mike Cohen, he had a great story about talking about pair programming, and then one person in the company just left the room, said, I'm not doing that, just left. And when he talked to the person, he realized the following. Every year, that company has a review and people get bonuses for the quality of their code. Sounds like a great idea. Better code, more money. Awesome. But if you do pair programming, you don't know which code was written by you. So you actually get less money at the end of the year if you do pair programming. So obviously that person wouldn't want to do that. He would actually get less money. So sometimes you actually have to look at the rewards and punishments of the company, of the system, that prevent you from doing specific things. And until you change them, nothing is ever going to change. Another key takeaway is that sometimes you'll have more than a single force influencing the bad behavior. You will have to fix all of the forces that influence it badly before it will change. If you just fix one of two forces, it will still not change. You have to fix both. You don't have to do it at the same time, but you still have to fix both before anything will change. So now, that might give you some tools. When you are faced with a problem like that, where someone doesn't do something, you can start looking at this like a list of chat boxes. Well, okay, does he have the ability to come to a stand-up meeting on time? Well, actually, he's in a wheelchair and we don't have any lifts. That might explain it. Okay, or does he have the ability to actually do good Scrum? Well, we sent him to a course, so he has the ability, but when I talk to him, and motivation, to understand personal motivation, you will have to sit down and talk to the person. Again, all the talking thing, part of the job. You will have to sit down and ask, why aren't you doing it? Don't replay that in your head before you do it and say, I know, I'm going to say that, and then he's going to say that, and then eventually I'm going to fire him. No. What's going to happen is that you have to sit down and get rid of those stories in your head. Otherwise, you just make up stories about why that person isn't or is doing something. Maybe that person had a really bad experience in a previous project, and that's why they don't want to do something. That's something that happens all the time, especially in agile projects where people don't want to do something. They might have already been burned doing TDD in a previous project and it went horribly, horribly bad. Could explain a lot. So you teach someone, you understand their behavior forces, that's great. And you only do that after you're out of survival mode. If you want to change behavior, you have to learn how behavior changes. So in learning mode, another thing that I would recommend doing is to challenge people to solve their own problems. Now, a good sentence is, what are you going to do about it? But some people might find it offending. However, when someone comes to you and says, you know what, I need you to help me solve that problem. Can you please solve it for me? Can you please write a piece of code for me so that I can do something? You can ask that person, how about you do it yourself? I'll help you, but you do it. Challenge them to do it themselves. If they ask you, why? I just came to you so you can do it. It's your job. You say, no, my job is to teach you how to do it. I'll make sure you do it right, but you have to do it. I'll sit with you, but you have to do it. You don't have to do this for everything. You have to choose. You cannot challenge people for everything. Like, hey, can you get me a glass of water? You have to do it, right? You cannot do that for everything. You have to pick your battles. Teach people one skill at a time. Don't teach them 5 skills at a time. So you will help them with all the other problems, but one problem they have to solve themselves. And after that, a few weeks later, you teach them another skill and another skill. And for each person, they have different skills that they have to learn. But challenging them to solve their own problems, that should be the key part of your day, seeing how they do it, challenging them so that they can do it, making sure that you never work alone. If you work on something and you discover that you are the bus factor, you are the bottleneck, then you have to stop doing that alone. You have to invite someone and say, hey, I want you to learn how to do this. Let's sit together and fix the build. Let's sit together and do this architect thing. Let's pair program on this. You type, I'll help you. And people, a lot of times, will be happy to do that. They wish they could learn something from you. They wish you wouldn't just sit in your office quiet all day with the door shut. They wish you just wouldn't be in meetings all day and just taught them something, because they also want to be architects. They also want to get better. You'd be surprised just how much people want to get better. There will always be some people who don't. And when they don't, you can look at the behavior forces and try to understand why. Why don't they want to pair program with you? Why do they want to hog information? Why do they want to stop and not do that work? What's influencing them not to do it? And you have to figure it out. You have to become a psychologist, a Sherlock Holmes. That's a new skill for you. A lot of times, one of the biggest problems in learning mode is that people like to say that they will do something and they never actually do it. People tell you, yeah, okay, I'll do unit testing, and then they never actually do it. People say, okay, I'll do that job, and then they never actually do it. So what I want to introduce is the idea of commitment language. Commitment language is the actual words we use when we promise something. And it's the beginning of actually meaning what we say. It changes the way we communicate with each other, and it puts some integrity into the way we talk. And this is, again, this is something that might feel awkward at first. When I do this, I teach like a 2-day course for team leaders and architects and project managers, and this is one of the things that I teach, and then we do drills, and it's always very, very awkward. But it's good, because if it was easy for everyone, it means they're not learning anything. So, what does commitment language mean? Well, we always use language that gives us a way out when we promise something, right? We need, I could, we're always like a victim. It would be nice if, yeah, I could probably do that by Saturday. Could probably, you know. There's always a way out. There's always a way that if you didn't get it done, well, you said could probably, right? And so in our mind, the way we promise something has a lot to do with whether we actually mean it or not. If I say, yeah, I need to lose weight, does it actually mean I'm going to lose weight? No. I'm just saying something. I'm just, saying things. Definitely true. If you finish a meeting and everyone agrees, yes, we definitely need to do that. Yes, so we'll need to have a talk with that person. Okay, and then you finish the meeting and everyone leaves. Does anyone know what they have to do? Who's going to do the talking? No, everyone just said something that everyone feels great. And then the next meeting, the same subject comes up. And it will never get solved. Or maybe someone has to take an initiative, but nobody knows. So instead of using these words, let's use specific words. Let's use I will and give an end time, and end date. I will talk to that person by the end of this week. That's a commitment. That's something that you don't just promise, that's something that you will say as a fact. I will talk to that person. I will pair with that person. I will do a presentation about unit testing. I will, et cetera, et cetera. And by having that commitment language, we can start and see whether that's actually going to happen or not. Because people usually feel very uncomfortable saying this when they feel that they cannot do it. So when we do a stand-up meeting and people say, okay, we'll have to do that, then I will usually ask them, so you will, and I try to get them to finish the sentence. And then people usually say, I will do this. But sometimes people will say, I will, I can't. I can't commit to that because I need to do this, and I need to do that, and I need to do whatever. And then you realize, and then that bubbles up the problems of why things will not happen. You have to fix the problems so that things will happen. There's one risk about this, is that sometimes people will actually promise you things that they cannot actually accomplish, or that they cannot have full control over. For example, you can say, I will meet, or I will fix these 5 bugs by the end of the week. It doesn't mean you can actually do it. You don't have control over whether the bug will actually get fixed. You don't know where the bug is. Do you actually know how much time it's going to take? No. So if you ask someone to commit to fixing 5 bugs by the end of the week, you're actually telling them to lie to you. You have to figure out whether something is under that person's control or not. So instead of committing to fixing those bugs, you can ask them to commit to actions that will lead to fixing those bugs. So I will work at least 5 hours every day this week to fix those 5 bugs. That's something that's fully under their control. You cannot ask other people to work with other people, because unless they actually control the other people's schedule. I will meet with the marketing person by the end of this week. Not true. I will send a meeting appointment by email by the end of today. Possible. So if you cannot commit to it, commit to actions that lead to it. If you're a team that does commitments for development, you can say we will work X amount of hours on that feature until we finish that feature. You never know how long the feature will actually take. A lot of times we feel bad because we commit to things we cannot actually control. And so we feel really bad. But the truth is, we actually did our best. And that was good enough. You cannot do something other than your best. You still might not actually finish something because reality changes all the time. But you can commit to doing the work towards it. You can have goals which might not be attainable, but you cannot have commitments that you cannot control. So you can have high-level goals for an iteration, but you can only commit to work towards those goals. So there's a difference. I was working in a team where we kept committing to goals. Yes, we will finish all these extra products and get the performance done within the end of this iteration. And every iteration, we would miss our commitments. And every iteration, we'd feel really, really crappy about it. But the truth is, we went really fast, and we added a lot of features, and we did it in a test-driven way. Everything was great, but we committed to things that kept changing. So we always felt bad about it. But the truth is, we were doing really, really well. So that's the difference, goals versus commitments. You can only commit to things under your personal control. So in summary, what I'd like to say is that there's this concept, and I call this concept elastic leadership. And the concept is that you have to change your leadership style to fit the current situation that your team is in, to fit the current requirements that your team needs from you. If your team doesn't have the ability to work with the current reality and solve their own problems, then they will need you to help them. For example, in survival mode, you will spend much more time with your team than in meetings, hopefully. In survival mode, you should commit to have at least 50% of your time dedicated to sitting with your team. Because if you're not there, and in survival mode everyone is running like this, they will never get out of survival mode. In survival mode, the leadership style is usually a more command and control, right? When the Titanic is sinking, the captain doesn't call a meeting, they start giving orders. In survival mode, you are much more command and control, and that's perfectly okay. But if you get out of survival mode and you have time to learn and practice, command and control suddenly becomes a very bad idea. Because when you tell people what to do instead of teaching them how to think, you're not teaching them anything. They're not learning anything. You will always, forever, be the bottleneck. They will never truly be self-organizing. So to teach people new skills, you have to let go of command and control and start coaching. Sometimes in learning mode, you will actually have to stop and say, no, we cannot go down that route. When the decisions made are so costly that you cannot afford them, you don't have time to afford them, then you have to stop. For example, yeah, we're not going to stop using source control. Okay? That's an example of something that you might say even in learning mode. The team is like self-organizing, but they made a really horrible decision. Sometimes you actually have to steer the ship back and say, come up with 3 different solutions, but we have to use source control. That's an example of combining a bit of command and control, but a lot of coaching, because you're forcing them to think about new solutions. And in self-organizing mode, you have to be more of a facilitator, someone that helps the team figure out how to be better without telling them what to do. You're more like an advisor or anything like that, but you usually just control the team from the outside. They already know how to make the architectural decisions, so you might just ask interesting questions. If you see that they're making the wrong architectural decisions, you can change some of the ways that they have to make the decisions. You can ask them to meet on a weekly basis with other architects. You can have other people in the team advising. You can do a lot of things, but you cannot tell people what to do, because the whole point of self-organization is you don't want to tell people what to do, unless you might be moving backwards. And this is another important point, is that when you talk about the elastic leadership phases, you could move between those modes all the time. You could be one day in survival mode and one day in self-organizing mode. If your team fully knows how to fix something, they've done it 100 times before, they don't need you to come up and say, okay, let's do a scrum meeting, and then what are you going to do today? If they've done it 100 times before, that's just wasting their time. You might not even need a stand-up meeting. The team should decide on their process if they truly know what they're doing. But one day you might get a requirement that is totally different. You've never done before. I need this to talk to this. You have 3 months. Nobody knows what the hell they're doing, and you're back in survival mode because you're not even sure if you're overcommitted. You have to go back to the drawing board, start estimating again, and estimating for spikes and trying to see whether you actually have time to learn. And if you don't, you're in survival mode, and then you have to go back and say, we cannot do this in 3 months, or in 3 months we can do something else. And that's a key taking, is that you can move away from these things, and as a leader, you have to realize, you have to understand what phase are you in currently. And when as a team leader, or as an architect, or as a project manager, I see that the team is moving, I gather the team up and say, I think we're back in survival mode because X, Y, Z. So we're going to be doing things a bit differently now. From now on, everyone works on what they're best at. That's a very big difference, because in learning mode, everyone works on what they're worst at, because I want them to learn. So database people will work on the UI, or will work with UI people. UI people will work with database people on database tasks, or at least I would like that to happen as much as possible, because the goal in learning mode is to remove bus factors. A bus factor, most of you already know, is the amount of people that have to get hit by a bus before the team shuts down and cannot work. 1 person bus factor is the worst that could happen. 1 person tomorrow doesn't come to work, team doesn't know what to do. And we had that in one of the latest projects that I was in, We had one person who knew how to work with the search engine. One person, we had 70 people in the project. One person knew how to work with the search engine. One day, the search engine stops working. The person on vacation. Everyone calls the person frantically, trying to get them. Nothing. The whole day goes by. 3 other architects are trying to solve the problem. Nobody knows what the hell they're doing. Everyone's like, seems to compile. And then we figure out that maybe a couple of years ago, we worked with an external company, and maybe someone from that company can help. So we pick up the phone at 5 in the evening, and someone within 10 minutes fixes the problem and indexing something. And that's an example of 3-4 people's time wasted for a single bus factor. Right? And those people's time are very, very expensive. And it could easily have been multiple days, because that person was truly on vacation, unreachable. That's so easy to accomplish. Now, before we actually finish, I'd like to invite you to look at 5whys.com to learn a bit more information. And we actually have, I think, a few minutes for questions and answers. So before we do that, are there any questions that you'd like to ask? Yes?
Mostly what you talked today is about how to keep my team learning and making things. How? Okay. I don't know. It's working, no?
You feel uncomfortable?
Mostly how to keep my team learning and do things faster. And isn't it main responsibility of R&D manager? And if both, why organization need 2 persons making same thing?
Mm-hmm. So the question was basically, isn't all this the responsibility of the manager or the team leader? And I would say that this is definitely not just the responsibility of one person in the team. So if I was the team leader on that team, I would grow another person to be a leader. And I would ask them to start challenging other people. So I believe that everyone who is a bottleneck should be teaching other people. If I'm the team leader, I only have a limited amount of time to coach people at some point. And there are some things that I'm not an expert in. I would expect my architect to also coach people about architecture. Okay?
So another part, our organization needs 2 people, architect.
Why does your organization needs 2 people to do architecture?
2 person to take care about it. So
why does the organization need 2 people to care about architecture?
No, to care about
leading people, about growing people.
Learning people.
Organizations that truly want to succeed should be constantly growing and learning new things. The minute they stop growing and learning new things, you are actually going backwards. So what happens is that you come into a company. Have you ever been to a company where you come in and you feel like you're basically 50 years behind? That's an example of a non-learning organization. Have you ever been to a department? There's one department out there, everyone is talking, etc., and then one department out there, and everyone is like in the ice age? That's an example of a department that's not learning anything. People start leaving the organization very, very quickly when they see that they're not getting challenged and not learning new things. On the other hand, people that learn and get challenged will always remember the experience, will always want to be in those places. And the people who don't want to be in those places, good riddance.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Yeah. Can you, I don't know how you're going to pass the mic. Oh, 2 mics. How many microphones do you have? That's cool. Okay. Yes.
So I work on a few projects that span across a number of teams. The team that I work the closest with tends to effectively self-organize and make decisions on, have started to make decisions on the things in the way that I would expect them to. But the problem ends up being when I'm not there and you've got a number of teams that can sometimes just stop in fear of making the wrong decision or making the completely wrong decision, but because there's so many teams potentially in different countries as well, it's very, very difficult to coach some of those people. How do you get past that kind of problem?
I think that for each organization, the reason the teams stop self-organizing when the manager leaves after some point, it depends on the organization and what they're working on. For example, if your team is working on medical devices and they're not sure what to do, I think it's okay that they stop, okay? But if your team is working on a database-related system that doesn't have critical life, if it doesn't lose millions of dollars or anything like that, criticality is relatively low, then coaching your team and asking basically, why did you stop when I wasn't here? What was your biggest fear? Try to understand that. Try to understand the motivation. Look at the influence forces. See what happens when you're not here. Try to talk to the people one by one instead of as a group. Maybe they will tell you something that they're not comfortable saying as a group. Maybe someone is taking the lead and teaching other things while you're not there. Maybe. It could be that they still have things to learn, and that's okay too. These things take time. They take years. I once had a person that I was coaching for 6 months before there was a big noticeable difference. So I don't give up until at least 6 months after I try to do something. So after 6 months, I was really happy that I didn't have to give up. But actually, that person left after that. For a different reason, but then he became a team leader at another company. And he sent me an email and said, you know what, now I understand. Sometimes people need a jolt. They actually need to do something different before they realize what they learned. And that's okay too. Sometimes people need to leave the job and find another one before they realize how much difference they actually have made. That's life. So an answer to a different question, but still I hope that was okay. Okay, other questions? How long do we have? 10 minutes? Okay, last question. Just use 2 microphones.
Hi. Yeah, 2 questions. The first question is, what are some good strategies to get a team out of the survival mode, specifically a team that's under a lot of pressure to ship product? Yeah, that's the first question. Second question is, in terms of DevOps, so deploying code, build management, typically that's a bus count of 1. How do you distribute that, or do you have to have one person responsible?
Okay, so I need you to choose one of those questions.
Okay, the first one. How do you get a team out of survival mode that is under pressure to ship product?
Well, again, that depends on the exact team and the forces that influence that team. You have to understand the forces. I don't think that's an advice that I can give in a very generic way. But the basic physical idea is that you look at your current commitments and you set a red line in the near future and you say, now we are putting out fires, but within a month, within 2 months, within 3 weeks, we are putting a red line. After that red line, we will be changing our commitments. So you can wait until you ship, you can wait before you ship, but you have to do this with management. You have to put the red line with management and say, after this red line, we're doing a reboot of the team, a reboot of our commitments. And after that, things will take longer, and we can do less things in the same amount of time, because right now, this is not a sustainable way. We're doing it in a way that is actually hurting the organization. How you actually convince the people this is the right idea, people are so complex, every organization is so different, there is no one way. But those are the goals. That's something that I would plan. When do I put the red line? Who do I need to talk to about this? And there is a before and there is an after. And in the after, there is only a single mode, and the mode is getting out of survival mode. And once you get out of there, then you can actually do things differently. But before the red line, you work in survival mode, you work in command and control mode, and you get people to be as productive as possible in their own limitations. If someone is actually hurting the team, for example, that's the time when you would say, you know what? You're sitting in a different room. You're hurting the team. We will actually be more productive when you're not here. You don't have to say that to their face, though. But you get rid of disturbances, and you focus the team, and this is what classically a lot of team leaders believe they should be doing all the time. Protect the team, put them in the bubble, let them work, get all of the stuff out of their way. But no, that's just the beginning. That's the beginning mode. And after that, you have to get the teams out of the bubble. But first, you have to get them in a bubble until you can reach the red line. To reach the red line, you have commitments before and you have commitments after. So you actually say, okay, in 3 weeks, we can get this, 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 and this done. All these other things, we're not doing. or you can decide with management what does fit in those 3 weeks. But you still need to put the red line somewhere. Otherwise, when you don't have that goal, you don't have that target, you will not be focused enough to actually do this. So I hope that helps. Okay. So before we finish today, I was thinking maybe we'll do a little short song. I know that sounds weird, but weird is why we're here. For the song, something even weirder, I'm going to need a volunteer. What? So let me ease your mind. Volunteer doesn't have to sing, does not have to dance, no nude photos, nothing. You just have to come in, stand there, press space so that other people can see the words of the song. Okay. I will offer a bribe. You will get a copy of my book, Notes to Software Team Leader, if you come in and you press space. Oh, that was easy. He didn't even wait for me to say yes or you. You see? Now, when I speak of influence forces, okay, what's your name, sir?
Yen.
Sorry?
Yen.
Yen.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
You're very tall. Okay, the first thing I need you to do is don't touch anything. Like a true architect, right? Okay. So what are we going to do first? We're going to prepare Yen for what's going to happen. I'm going to give you a little test. So here's what I want you to do. Whenever I finish singing the words on the screen, you just press space. Nothing else. Okay? This is a test line. Kind of slow. It looks like you're doing just fine. Too slow. Faster. It's time for a song of mine. I like that. Okay. I think he's ready. Okay. So a little bit about this song. This is a song I wrote with, what's his name? He wrote this song, and then I gave him the lyrics. He changed them. So this is a song I wrote about the worst team that I've ever been in. So early in my career, I was working in a horrible, horrible team. Nothing was ever working. And this is something that eased my mind. I would always go back to this in hard times. It's late in the evening. I'm wondering what words to say. It's so hard to breathe here. The customer's face is gray. And then he asks me, is the product all right? And I say yes, we deploy it all tonight. I check in the changes. The code doesn't even compile. I wish I was home now, but instead I just fake a big smile. And when they asked me, is the code all right? I say yes, it seems to compile tonight. And I feel horrible because I see the sadness in their eyes when they find out that the product doesn't even have log files. This thing is doomed. It's time to go home now, and I've got an aching head. So I lock my computer and pray that tomorrow I'm dead. When my wife asks me, do you feel alright? I say yes, let's watch Game of Thrones tonight. But I feel miserable because I'll guess the madness in their talk when they find out that tomorrow I don't plan to come to work and write my CV. Thank you very much.